Hello, welcome back to White Fox Vintage Snowmobile. I'm Al Pinkney. This will be episode 10 of the W project. We're building a snowmobile race on the ice. It's a vintage snowmobile and it'll be on an oval track. We're here in western Canada. It's the deep and dark of winter, but we don't have a lot of snow. But the ice is ready, so we got to get this racer going. Tonight's episode we will work on the lube system for the slide rails, a little bit on some other odds and ends, and probably work on getting the engine out of a donor sled into this sled so it'll run on its own power. You might notice that I've been jumping around on how I've been building this. I've got 100 accumulated video clips and I don't know what I taped in what order, but I'll try to make some sense. So thanks for watching and stay tuned. It's been a few months since we've worked on the W project, but we've got all our summer work and summer vacation done and kitchen cabinets refinished in the house, so now we're into carrying on. This is Legally Pink. This is an old drag racer that we ran for many years. About 10 years ago, my daughter decided that she wanted to name the sled. When I built this little drag racer about 8 to 10 years ago, Legally Blonde was the hot movie in the theater with Reese Witherspoon. So my daughter thought a suitable name would be Legally Pink. 250 TX, 1978, and it's got basically a Starfire, 76 Starfire engine in it. There's been some porting and compression work done. We've won lots of trophies in the 250 air-cooled mod classes, 250 liquid, jump up to the 300s. Not as fast as some of our competitors, but we had a lot of fun. Now this motor is going to get transplanted into the W project, where we'll run 250 Super Stock, 250 Air Super Mod, and some of the lower classes. So we'll just start the camera and tear this engine out of here. It's got a little bit of work to be done with it, take the clutch guard off and the clutches and so forth. Before we tear the engine out, we should probably make sure it runs. It hasn't run since early 2015. Now, there's some gas in the tank, but this sled, all sleds are different. This one seemed to always react favorably to a little squirt primer in the carbs on a cold start. Kill switch on. Chokes on, tether switch on. Great success. This is the improved clutch guard we built a few years back for this sled. It's Turned out pretty well. We just put some 1/8 inch aluminum over the existing cover and then built some side covers. It's a little bit wonky in this area here that my clutch bolt sticks out a wee bit. I hope the tech inspector passes that. A little bit warm. One reason I love working on the older sleds is that the simplicity is awesome. It only will probably take half an hour to pull this engine out of this sled, and to take the top end, the cylinders off, is equally as easy. A lot better than the new stuff. Why Al only has 3 bolts in the recoil, that's a good question. This is a later Polaris recoil because it only has 1 tooth instead of 3. And because of the cutout, I think it's from a liquid engine. Maybe an Indy 600, but it makes a good spare, or usable. What a greasy mess. Forgot to turn the camera on, but we took the CDI box off the frame and the coil. The recoil starter, you saw most of that. Like I say, these engines are easy to pull out. Next step is to take the motor mount bolts out, and this thing will be on the workbench. One thing I don't like about these old sleds is they always tied the hood cable to the engine. So anytime you worked on the engine or went to pull the engine, it was always a pain in the ass. So we have to tie that off so we don't break our hood in 2 pieces. Let's see if the beast will come out. No problem. So I removed the old case-mounted fuel pump and laid it aside, and I went digging for some barb fittings, so we found something that's 1/8 inch pipe thread, and so now it's a matter of drilling the case and tapping it. Now we put lots of grease on our drill bit, so hopefully most of the filings will come out, and the same with the tap. So we'll try to show you that operation. Try to get it square. This should really be jigged up somehow in a press or something. Don't want to go too far. So we have a 1-inch pipe thread tap mounted in our socket wrench. There's, again, a proper machinist would have this jigged up so you're perfectly square, but doesn't always happen around here. The trick here is to see that we're straight. It's basically a brand new tap, so I don't anticipate any problems. And I don't feel to be going in pretty good. Again, a good coating of grease on the tap, and I'm hoping it'll pick up all the filings. I'm not going to go too far here because I don't want to be too loose. Looks good. Quite pleased with that. We'll give it a wrap of Teflon tape just to be on the safe side. Awesome. Other than the fact that it sticks out 4 miles, but we'll take it. Now I'll go in search of the proper mounts for these. These old TXs had a standoff here with 1/4-inch bolts that held the pump up, and we'll do that before we drop the engine in the frame. This is the Mikuni fuel pump that came off the donor sled for the W project. I'm hoping it works. In the past I've been guilty of not clamping my fuel lines. It seems like they come off when you don't want them to, and they don't come off when you do. So I'm going to clamp this one. This is the pulse line for underneath, and we've happened to find a clamp that fits this line nice and tight. So I'm hoping that arrangement will work. Possibly we'll come this way to keep it away from the clutch side. Here we have the voltage regulator down there, the CDI box, ignition box installed, and the wiring harness, such as it is. I just laced it up there, but I just realized it's probably got to come apart for when I install the dashboard, but anyway. And the coil pack. So we're ready to nestle the engine in here just to see how our front motor mounts will work out. They're not drilled out yet, and we have a bit of a time with that box aluminum frame getting a nut on there. I just realized this one won't be too bad. You can see the punch mark, but the other one could be a little testy. Eureka! It fits! Just just like it was meant to be in there. Now we'll reinstall the clutches and make sure that we've got a good alignment, our offset and our center to center before we drill any holes. The positioning of the motor is pretty much fixed by the back's mount, but it can be shimmed and washed up and down a bit. But yeah, that looks fairly promising. So I've run into something that I've heard about motor mount issues on these different TXs, but I've never had the pleasure. But when I set this motor in this chassis, I see two things that are wrong. The engine is sitting slightly higher, and I don't think my clutch puller will work. It's going to hit the bumper. But probably more serious, when I go to fit the clutch, it doesn't clear this front, the bracket that comes up from the front I-beam to hold the bumper. So now this motor mount came with this motor, which is a 250. And I'm going to grab the 340 motor mount, which was originally in this chassis, and it should be the same bolt pattern, and we'll see if that works any better. So here's the two motor mount plates side by side, and you can see that the bottom one is that came with the chassis, and the top one is what I had in there. Now that top one, if memory serves me correct, might be a 440 mounting plate that I modified for the 250. It's been at least 10 to 12 years since I worked on this sled or put it together. So anyway, I think that'll lower the engine considerably and straighten out our problems. I hope. Again, I had the camera off to save you the boring details, but we changed the motor mount. Luckily we had the one from the previous chassis, and they are quite different. Drilled our front bulkhead holes so we could get some bolts in the front. And our clutch now fits on. That clutch is actually in pretty sad shape, so we'll have to consider an upgrade. And you know, just threw the carbs on to keep them from rolling around on the workbench. So it's looking like things are shaping up. I'll mount the secondary clutch and check the center to center and the clutch offset, just to make sure we're in the ballpark. According to the Polaris service manual, the clutch center to center distance is 12 inches. They make tools for these things, but I loaned my guide out to somebody and it hasn't come back yet, so I will just freehand measure this, and I'd say we're very close to the 12-inch center to center, so we're pleased with that. The offset, I do have a piece of straight bar here that nicely fits behind the drive clutch, and the dimension here for this particular sled is 5/8 of an inch, and we can shim this secondary clutch in and out a little bit. I'd say we're bang on there. Very close. So possibly if we leave the secondary clutch floating a little bit, then, which it looks like it won't, but it looks like we'll be very close for the offset, so, which means we won't have any screwing around with the motor mounts to make it perfect. My next step is to go ahead and bolt the motor down and bolt the primary clutch on, such as it is. So our 250 TX engine is bolted in. The clutch, such as it is torqued. I just threw the carbs on to keep them off the workbench, as we mentioned earlier. Found a half decent recoil starter. Missing one tab here for some reason, but I think we got enough bolts in there to hold it. So we're just mounting a little eye bolt to mount our starter rope handle. I'm a little concerned that this starter rope position will conflict with the hood when we close it, so stay tuned. This might get updated. Just tie a loop in the rope so it doesn't disappear on us inside the recoil starter. Generally, one good knot will hold this, although I have occasionally tied a double knot. The rope does rub on the disc brake. I don't know how to solve that without finding another guide, which we can do at a later date, possibly up here maybe. But again, we'll see how the hood fits and things like that. I'm just kind of laid the exhaust pipe into the chassis, and this pipe has never been in this chassis, so we got a problem here. I'll have to fabricate a little angle bracket to hold the back of the muffler up. Because it's an oval racer and not a drag racer, I think there should be some bouncing going on. We'll also work on a support in this area just to hold the front of the pipe in place. I think a lot of the sleds had a little bracket there as well. So a little bit too much room under here to do anything, so we'll do the back and the front and cinch it down. Sort of dark in here, but here's Al's handy dandy metal brakes we built last year. Again, watched some patterns on YouTube and so forth, so I knew this would be handy for when we fabricate some of the brackets and shields and dashboards on the sled. So well, hopefully this thing will work. Just make sure the work is square with the table. 10 1/4, 10 1/4. I should have some scribe lines on there. Anyway, we cinch that down and last 90-degree bend. This is a prototype unit. As I said before, a lot of the things I build are prototypes because the next one I'll build will be better. Yeah. As I say, prototypes don't always work out. A quick release clamp would be a good idea, but next time. So our little bracket is fabricated. We're just putting the last pop rivet in. I have some doubts about how strong, or whether this is going to be strong enough, but onward and upward. We installed the clutch guard. This is the improved clutch guard from that other sled. Simply a case of riveting it on. Still have not very proud of that situation right there. The clutch bolt sticking out through, but perhaps we can cut this panel off and put a cupped arrangement. Still got an issue with the front latch. Have to engineer a little catch for the older clutch guard. But that's done. Pipe is mounted and held down. It just barely clears the hood, believe it or not. And possibly we could have had this this pipe lower, but it seemed to sit there. And the gas tank is riveted down. A little bit of it got pretty tight in here to get the rivet gun in, but there it sits. My next step is to go ahead and bolt the motor down and bolt the primary clutch on, such as it is. And I guess we'll talk on the phone as well.